You need carbohydrates for high intensity performance. Well, that's what they say. Is it true? Well, let's find out. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to compare two VO2 Max Run workouts. One that I did in March 2025, so a couple of months ago, ahead of 70.3 Oceanside. And this is when I was fully fat adapted, of course. And we're going to compare that to an identical workout that I did when I was carb dependent back in November 2023, ahead of 70.3 Indian Wells. So what happened? Good morning. So I've got a VO2 Max run session today. A bit of a fitness boost, hopefully, ahead of Oceanside next week. I'm going to be doing this on what's called the Loop here in Tucson. The Loop is a network of paths. You can see this path beside me here. I think they've got about a couple of 100 miles worth of paths here, and it's absolutely fantastic for doing all your running. Really good for like easy recovery rides or just nice long steady rides if you're not going too fast, because there are some pedestrians on it. You have to watch what you're doing. Some people walking their dogs or walking their prams with their babies in and so on. Not too many, so it's a really good place. So the session today, we've got a 3 kilometer warm up, just nice and easy, zone 1, zone 2, just to get the legs moving. And then to kick start ahead of the VO2 Max intervals, I'll be doing about a handful of strides. So strides being gradual accelerations up to about 90% of your maximum speed, with a little bit of a rest in between. So a handful of those. And then into 4 1 kilometer VO2 Max efforts. And these are going to be into my zone 5. So for me, I'm looking to hit around about 4 minutes per kilometer. Hopefully tuck under that for the most part. Yeah, it depends on how I'm feeling, but yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm a little bit tired today, but hopefully after I get through the warm-up, I'll be feeling more like it. So I'll check in with you later. Cheers. Just finished the VO2 Max interval run. It's getting warmer now. You can probably see the bike's here, so I'm going to do a 45-minute recovery ride, just very easy, spin the legs, relatively high RPM, just to loosen up the body after the run. I'll go through the run in detail once I get back home, but these are difficult to pace. 4 by 1 kilometer VO2 Max, very easy to go off too hard on the first one, but thankfully today I judged it quite well. I managed to do a progression through each of the intervals, so very happy with that, very happy with the pace. Again, I'll go through when I get back home. Okay, cheers for now. So here we are, it's the run warm-up, and this consisted of 3 kilometers at zone 1 or zone 2, depending on how I was feeling. I went through the first kilometer in 5:08, which is about the middle of my zone 2 pace, and then into the second kilometer I picked it up a little bit and hit a 4:58 for that second kilometer, and then just a slight increase in pace again in the third kilometer to 4:52, which is about the top end of my zone 2 pace. And then if you watch the top left hand side of the screen here, you'll see the increase in pace, and this corresponds to the strides that I was doing, so 5 of these before starting the main set of the VO2 Max efforts. So here we are, we're in the main set now, the first of the 4 VO2 Max efforts, and going through in 3:53 for the first kilometre, probably with an RPE of around about 6 to 7, given that it's the first effort. I'm just getting into it. Onto the second effort, and very happy to pick up the pace a little bit. So going through in 3:50, probably the RPE sitting around about 7 to 8, I would say. So things hotting up with the pace and the RPE and the temperature as well. In the third effort, I would say the RPE is probably sitting around 8.5 here, and picked up the pace again. Very pleased to hit a 3:43 on this kilometre. So just one more VO2 Max effort to go. And on this fourth and final effort, I'm definitely at an RPE of around about 9, and very happy to pick up the pace again and hit a 3:39. Overall, very pleased with this workout, very tough workout, and RPE probably averaging around about 8, I would say, overall. Of course, we can't forget the cool down, and settling down here to really nice slow pace, 6:03 per kilometre, to reset the body, reset the mind, and you can see the heart rate coming down nicely there. So that completes the fat adapted VO2 Max Run workout. We're now going to move on and compare that with the carb dependent workout that I did in November 2023. We're going to look at the data from both workouts and see how the comparison goes. So here we are in Training Peaks, and I just want to show the two VO2 Max workouts. So the one from March 2025 when I was fat adapted. Overall workout was 10 kilometers and the TSS was 71. The description here, we don't need to go through in detail, but you can take a quick glance at it and we'll see that it is identical to the workout that I did in November 2023. So if I pull that one up now, so this is when I was carb dependent and before Indian Wells 70.3, 10 kilometer overall workout, the TSS 70 as opposed to 71. So very similar as far as effort was concerned. And the description here is identical. So really just to confirm that I've got both of these workouts, I've got the data from them, one being when I was fat adapted in March 2025 and one being when I was carb dependent in November 2023. So I've been through all of the data and summarized it, and I'd like to go through that with you now. And in the warm-up we can see that I was running the first 3 kilometers. So when I was fat adapted, 508, 458 and 452 per kilometer. And when I was carb dependent back in November 2023, the first 3 kilometer pacing wise, I went 513, 508, 459. There's no competition here. It was just the way I executed the workout on the day. And looking at heart rates, quite similar, given that I was going just a little bit quicker in the workout when I was fat adapted. Looking at the strides, so I did 5 sets of strides before the main set. The average pace of the strides was almost identical, 324 versus 323, whereas my heart rate did get up a fair bit higher when I was fat adapted, and I'm not sure the exact reason, but I've got some ideas and we'll come on to that in a little bit. So in conclusion, pace and heart rate were slightly quicker and higher in the fat adapted workout. Onto the main set, and it's such a coincidence that the first 2 efforts, these 1 kilometer VO2 max efforts, they were identical pace-wise in the fat adapted workout and the carb dependent workout at 353 and 350 per kilometer. It looks like I went a little bit faster in the fat adapted workout, 343 and then 339 per kilometer. But you can see that my heart rate was slightly higher in the fat adapted workout compared to the carb dependent workout. I was going a little bit quicker, but not too much quicker. But again, the conclusion here from the main set, that is my pace and heart rate were slightly quicker and higher in this fat adapted workout. In between, it looks like I was jogging a little bit faster, in fact a fair bit faster in a couple of cases on the fat adapted workout. Whether that helped keep my heart rate a little bit higher or not, I'm not sure. But certainly in these rest intervals, you can see there's an increase in heart rate on the fat adapted workout versus the carb dependent workout. No change in RPE from what I remember, but certainly something going on with the heart rate there, if only slightly. What else might we take into account? Well, looking at the overall workouts, as we saw earlier, the TSS for the workouts were almost identical, 71 against 70. My feeling for the workout, my RPE was 8 in both cases, so a tough VO2 max workout. One key factor is that the normalized pace for the elevation for the grade was 438 per kilometer versus 444 kilometer fat adapted versus carb dependent. So I was overall working a little bit harder in the fat adapted workout than the carb dependent workout. Is that something to do with why my heart rate was a little bit higher? It doesn't seem to be that the temperature had much of an impact, because it was almost identical for both workouts. The average was I think 25 degrees for the fat adapted and 25 or 26 for the carb dependent workout. So ambient temperature almost identical, and the route was identical as well. I ran exactly the same route. Nutrition wise, we know that I was taking ketones and MCT powder for the fat adapted workout, whereas I was on the old sugary gels for the carb dependent workout back in November 2023. With regards to caffeine, and caffeine obviously has some impact on heart rate, I had 200 milligrams in the raspberry bomb just before the fat adapted workout, and I had 100 milligrams of caffeine in a caffeine infused gel before the carb dependent workout. Both of these pieces of nutrition had electrolytes in them as well. So conclusion, well, at the age of 57 years and 10 months, having become fat adapted, I was able to do the same VO2 Max Run workout marginally quicker and with a slightly higher heart rate than I did when I was age 56 years and 6 months, back when I was carb dependent. So yes, it's possible to do a VO2 Max Run workout at almost identical performance, whether you're fat adapted or whether you're carb dependent. As we've noticed, my pace and heart rate were slightly quicker and higher throughout the fat adapted workout, so working a little bit harder and heart rate a little bit higher. My RPE and the ambient temperature were almost identical for both workouts. Of course, I was fueled by fat for the fat adapted workout and sugars for the carb dependent workout. And I had 200 milligrams of caffeine and exogenous ketones for the fat adapted workout versus 100 milligrams of caffeine for the carb dependent workout. So regarding heart rate, why was my heart rate slightly higher for the same RPE in the fat adapted workout compared with the carb dependent workout? I don't know the exact answer to this question, but we do know that my pace throughout was marginally quicker in the fat adapted workout. That might be a good enough reason as to why my heart rate was a little bit higher, but also I did take a little bit more caffeine pre-workout for the fat adapted workout, so that contributes possibly to a slightly higher heart rate. What I don't know is my metabolism so different now that my heart rate is going to respond slightly differently, whether I'm using fat as a fuel compared to whether I used to be using sugar as a fuel. I'm not really sure, because I don't really see much difference in my other areas of training. And then finally, my other thought here was I understand that hydration has an impact on heart rate when we're working out. So possibly was I a little bit less hydrated for the fat adapted workout, which pushed my heart rate up very slightly. I'm not sure. But anyway, the conclusion here is that there's very little to choose from between these two workouts. I was 16 months older. I was a fat adapted athlete versus a carb dependent athlete. And still thankfully able to nail both of these VO2 Max Run workouts. So there we have it. You do not need carbohydrates to perform well in high intensity workouts. I hope this has been of use, and the next time someone says you need carbs for high intensity, you can turn around to them and say, well, that's complete and utter